What happens to your mind when you are completely alone? After just a few days in complete isolation, your mind begins to turn on itself. You start to lose your sense of identity. You question who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it. All rational thought, all logical thought goes out the window. You are now ruled by your lizard brain, your reptilian brain. This is the part of the brain that is all about survival. It makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. It makes you say things you wouldn't normally say. It makes you feel things you wouldn't normally feel. And this is what happens after just a few days of being completely alone. So I ask you now, how long would you last before losing your mind? Here's what isolation does to your brain. According to science, the human brain is wired for connection. For thousands of years, social interaction has been as vital to our survival as food or water. So, when you're cut off from all forms of human contact, no voices, no touch, no feedback, your brain begins to change. And it happens quickly. You see, when you're isolated, your levels of dopamine and serotonin drop. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and logic, starts to go quiet. And in that silence, something else begins to wake up. Here are some scary things that can happen to your brain if you're isolated for too long. Extreme isolation can cause you to experience common symptoms like auditory and visual hallucinations. As the brain begins to invent stimuli that aren't there, you might start hearing voices or seeing things that aren't really there. Time loses all meaning. Hours blur into days, days into weeks. Some report hearing voices, others see flashes of light or figures in the dark. Obsessive thoughts spiral out of control. Paranoia sets in. Sleep becomes fragmented or disappears entirely. Without social feedback, the mind starts to consume itself, and not everyone comes back the same. If you've ever had a psychotic break, you know how terrifying it is, but it's also a very human experience. It's what happens when we are at our most vulnerable. So if you're ever in this situation, please reach out for help. There is no shame in it, and you deserve to be heard. This is the most disturbing real-life experiment ever conducted. In 1962, French geologist Michel Siffre descended into a cave in the south of France. He was alone. There was no sunlight. There were no clocks. He had no contact with the outside world. He stayed there for 6 months. After 1 month underground, he believed only 10 days had passed. His internal sense of time completely collapsed. By the end of the experiment, he was hallucinating lights and hearing voices that didn't exist. But he wasn't the only one. In another experiment, conducted in the 1970s, a group of scientists spent 3 months in a cave in New Mexico. They experienced similar things to Siffre, including hallucinations and hearing voices. One of the scientists later said it was like being in a horror movie. Here's what happens when the mind starts to create reality. When the brain receives no input from the outside world, it creates its own. This is where hallucinations begin. A voice, a shape, a sensation of being watched. Neurologists call this the default mode network. It's a part of the brain that becomes highly active during rest or inactivity. In isolation, it goes into overdrive. Meditators activate this network intentionally through stillness and control, but forced isolation. That's chaos without direction, and the mind is left to wander anywhere it wants. What happens next is anyone's guess. You could end up believing things that aren't true, like you're being chased by a tiger through a jungle, or that you're flying through the air like a bird. Or maybe you'll have a more subtle experience, like feeling a deep sense of connection with everyone around you, or that you're one with the universe. The possibilities are really endless. What do you think? Can isolation be good for you? Well, it depends. Yes, it can be good for you. In fact, monks, hermits, and philosophers have used isolation as a tool, not a punishment. When chosen intentionally, solitude can lead to deep insight, spiritual clarity, and even healing. But there's a critical difference between then and now. When isolation is forced, the brain fights back. When it's chosen, the mind adapts and sometimes even transcends. This is why we see so many successful people embracing solitude, like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett. They understand the value of deep work and focus. And they also know how to use isolation to their advantage. So the next time you find yourself feeling lonely or isolated, ask yourself, is this a punishment or a tool? If it's the former, then you need to change your mindset. If it's the latter, then you need to change your environment. Isolating yourself can be a good thing. It can heal you, but it can also destroy you. It all depends on how and how long you're left alone with your thoughts. You can spend time in nature, disconnect from social media, stop watching porn, get rid of all the distractions, and just focus on yourself. That can be a good thing. But if you take things too far and you spend too much time alone, you can lose yourself. You can become so consumed with your own thoughts that you start to forget who you are. So, how long do you think you could last completely alone? How long could you go without losing yourself?